All right, I think we'll make a start. So hello and welcome to our webinar on the transition of recreational ballooning to CASA administration. My name is Alan Shaw and I'm the Senior Standards Officer for Balloons within the Flight Standards branch of CASA. Now, as you know, CASA assumed the administration on the 2nd of December last year for the administration of recreational ballooning activities from the Australian Ballooning Federation, who decided it wasn't equipped to undertake the function of an approved self-administering aviation organisation, or an ASAO, which is what happened to most of the other sporting aviation bodies, such as the gliders and the hang gliders and so on, who have become self-administering organisations. But a joint project was set up between CASA and the ABF, and that managed the transition at the end of 2023. So I'd like today to introduce you to Martin Tregale, who most of you know is the ex-president of the ABF, but is now with CASA until the end of this year at least, as a recreational ballooning specialist. And he's really looking after all aspects of getting everything sorted out up to date and the way forward. Martin thought it was important to provide some information to you all regarding the transition, as I say, where we're up to and where we're going. There will be time for questions at the end, and but if you feel compelled, if you don't want to forget, you can pop a note into the chat and we'll be able to pick that up at the end of the presentation. So once again, I'll just remind you to keep your cameras off and on mute until you need to speak when you're asking your questions. So I'll now over to you, Martin.
Thanks very much, Alan, and great to be working at CASA and with yourself, so thank you. Here's the agenda I'll take everyone through. So firstly, I'll talk a little bit about the overall transition arrangements, and then how CASA administration works, a little bit about some fixes we're making to 9554. And then I know there's a lot of students out there, so how do they transition from their ABF training into CASA or training under CASA? Some information from new student pilots who've joined since the 2nd of December. Some information from instructors and examiners. I'll talk about the recreational balloon flight review. Talk about some MOS requirements that are already in the procedures manual that are now in force, and talk about the work that's been done since the 2nd of December, since CASA's taken on the administration, and then a little bit about some next steps. So firstly, the overall transition arrangement. So there's no longer the ABF operations manual. That's been replaced by the CASA recreational ballooning procedures manual, or the CRBPM for short. So I think that's an important point. There's no more ABF ops manual. It's now the CASA recreational ballooning procedures manual. The Part 131, for people who follow the regulations closely, has a pilot authorisation in it, but the 9554 provides an exemption from holding that, which is the ballooning permit. So previous authorisations that were issued by the ABF were the private pilot balloon certificate, instructor ratings and examiner appointments. The new language for them are called CASA permits. So under 9554, if you held a certificate or another approval from the ABF prior to the 2nd of December, so prior to the transition date, you are deemed to hold an equivalent CASA permit. So I know there's some people out there that don't have their CASA, the CASA permit, printed permit yet. That doesn't matter as long as you hold your certificate and other approval from the ABF, i.e. your member jungle, and you can show that, then you are deemed to hold the CASA permit. The next point, the self-declared medical, as it worked in the within the ABF, has been transitioned across as is. There's no change to that. Private examiners and instructors do not need to belong to a flight school to conduct private training, so they remain what is explained as independent instructors and independent examiners. One thing we have lost from moving into CASA, it's more to do with Part 91 regulations, is there's no student experience flight. So there was an ability for an instructor to take someone for 2 hours for a bit of a go on the burners. That's no longer allowed. They must hold a permit to activate the controls. However, some good news. What has been simplified is a revalidation after a long absence from ballooning. So the main thing is there's no longer a requirement to redo all of the exams.
The theory exams.
Theory exams. All right. Moving on to CASA administration. So the procedures, as I said, they're contained in the procedures manual, the CRBPM. Everyone must have an aviation reference number, and the vast majority of recreational balloonists now have a recreation number. There's been some follow-ups that we've done. There was about 34 that didn't have any, and we've now got 10 more of those who've now applied, and the rest probably don't need to apply. They're no longer interested in pursuing the sport. There's 7 forms that are published on the website for you to make applications and to register flight reviews. They're listed there. The student permit application form, BF001, the private pilot permit application form, so that's a form that an examiner would fill out on completion of a student completing the exam flight, and all the requirements in the CRBPM is BF002. BF003 is the English language proficiency and medical, so that's where the self-declared English language or self-declared medical is done. The BF004 is probably the form that's going to be used the most, which is the notification to CASA of a successful flight review, like a BFR. BF005 is for instructors, where for initial issue of a new instructor or a flight review proficiency check after 2 years. There's also an application form for examiners, and the last one is a temporary issue of a private pilot balloon permit for 30 days. Tends to be used mainly for the Canberra Festival.
Well, that's for overseas pilots, isn't it?
Yeah. So there's a dedicated page on the CASA website for all this information. If you go to licenses and certificates on the homepage, pilot license and private pilot balloon permit, we've got a couple of screenshots on the next page of how to navigate to that. So you can see license and certificates at the top there will navigate you to licenses, and then there's a big block, private pilot balloon permit. And then when you click into that, you see this screen. And we've just got the top part of the screen here, but you can scroll down and it has all the information regarding all of those forms and all of the permits that CASA issued. So since the transition, we have found some errors and omissions in 9554. So we're in the process of fixing them at the moment. There's 5 things that we're working on. The first one being we're going to align the repeal date of the 9554. So again, people who closely look at know the regulations will know that the Part 131 MOS comes into effect on the 12th of November. The current 9554 will cease or be repealed on the 11th of November. There will be another 9554 that will come into force for 3 years, but I think I'll talk about that later on in the presentation. There was other things in there to state the requirements of the procedures manual must be followed for issue of a permit. There was a bit missing about issuing of non-controlled aerodrome endorsements. We're removing the references to repealing Part 131 ASIO, so that will remain in the regs. So if there is in the future a self-administering organisation that wishes to administer private ballooning, that will remain in the regulations. And also there was an error in there which inadvertently didn't allow CP commercial ballooning licence holders to fly recreation in controlled airspace, which wasn't the intent. So these changes, CASA needs to consult when making changes to regulations and CAOs, etc. So we're currently consulting with the Australian Ballooning Federation, and the amendments likely come into effect in early July. So moving to student pilots, transitioning from the ABF. So if you have your ABF Blue Book, that is the training that was completed under the ABF system and recorded in that Blue Book continues to be valid. Theory exams are valid as well, but they're only valid for 2 years and 1 month, and that was the same under the ABF system as well. CASA has made available a student training record that can be downloaded and printed. Commercially available student training records may also be used. So I know that there's some intent from some organisations, including the ABF and Kaminar Balloons, to have their own commercially available student training record. They will be available and possibly available and also valid to use. There is one new requirement to complete the Sport Aviation Human Factors course through the Aviation work. So that's the CASA learning management system, online learning management system. And that's been inserted in there to help ensure that the training that we deliver is ICAO compliant. The exams at the moment are available via the ABF online system, and they will be soon to be migrated to the CASA PEXO system. In the meantime, they can be hosted by a private pilot examiner or an instructor grade 1. So for new students who've applied to CASA since the 2nd of December, firstly, they must have an aviation reference number. They must be 15 years old, at least 15 years old. Be able to read, speak and understand English and complete BF003 to self-declare this. Must also self-declare physical fitness in the same form, so that BF003 is used for both English language and the self-declared medical. And apply for your student private balloon permit using BF001. You'd send BF001 and 003 in at the same time. The application fee for the BF001 is $30. You can then download and print the student training record from the CASA website, or again buy a commercially available one. You may consider joining the Australian Ballooning Federation to obtain access to training materials, a list of instructors, examiners, and information on events. And just a reminder, when you're training, you must not carry passengers unless the exercise requires the presence of passengers, emergency procedures, and not to be practiced, and passengers must not contribute in any way to the cost of the flight. Amanda, I can see a question just popped up. So how long should a student expect to take to receive their student licence? So, I mean, I've seen it take no longer than about 7 or 8 days from when they've been processed by the flight crew licensing team in CASA. So it's very quick. The CASA relies on the declaration of the examiner that all the requirements have been met, so there's no further auditing of that form. So it's just a matter of issuing the permit. Checking with my teenager to see about yes, I had to do that with my teenager as well. So instructors. So the ABF restricted instructor, which was the grade 3 and grade 2, is now a private pilot balloon instructor grade 2, and the ABF instructor unrestricted, the old grade 1 in the ABF system, is now a balloon instructor grade 1. So there's now 2 grades of instructor. Grade 2 is a lower grade and grade 1 is a higher grade. Flight tests for new instructors is 60 minutes, and a flight instructor proficiency test, which must be done every 2 years, is to be not less than 30 minutes. And that's notified to CASA via that same form, BF005. At the moment, as I said before, private pilot instructors grade 1 can supervise theory exams until they transition to CASA's PEXO system. And also for people who hold a CASA flight instructor balloon rating for training for commercial training, is deemed to be a grade 1 private instructor and can apply to CASA for that permit grade 1. And just there's some additional record keeping requirements as well for instructors. So when you complete training and record that flight in the student's book, you should take a scan or photograph of that relevant page for your records. You must also keep flight proficiency review forms and flight test forms, and copies of any records that you've relied on to demonstrate that an applicant has satisfied the requirements of the 9554 or the procedures manual. For example, if a grade 1 instructor is bringing forward a grade 2 instructor into the system, you should keep a copy of their logbook, which shows that they had the required 50 hours of PIC time, which makes them eligible for that grade 2 instructor permit. And those copies can be in electronic form and must be kept for 7 years. Similarly, for examiners, there's additional record keeping requirements for examiners. Again, the flight proficiency review forms and copies of any records that have been relied on again. And for examiners, probably one of the important documents, probably not the only one, but one of the important ones would be the student training record, which you've relied on to check that they've made all their they've complied with all the requirements of the procedures manual. And again, that must be kept for 7 years. Andrew, you've got a question in. Do instructors need a current working with children check still? No, they don't. Okay, the recreational balloon flight review. There's not many changes here from the ABS system. It must be carried out every 2 years. Not done in a balloon bigger than a 120. It must include 1 inflation, 30 minutes of flight time, and 1 landing and 1 deflation. That deflation might be new, but there certainly needs to be 1 flight including the deflation, which I think was a bit confusing and potentially in the ABS system. Can be carried out by an examiner or instructor grade 1 or 2, or a person approved by CASA. And then this is an important point as well. When the requirements have been satisfied, the reviewer needs to make an entry on the permit. So if there is a paper permit that's been issued, there is a table there for the reviewer to complete, to say you've completed that review and put the new date there, because your permit will have a BFR date, which obviously won't self-update because it's on a piece of paper, of course, but it's a table where you can, where the reviewer can update that date. So there's 3 things they need to do. They make that entry on that permit, they need to make an entry in your pilot logbook, and then they need to help complete that BF004, and then it's your responsibility as a reviewee to submit that to CASA. And there's no charge for CASA sending that for me. That'll mean that the CASA system is updated with that new date. And Damien, I think I'm about to answer your question here maybe. The RBFR is deemed to be satisfied if another listed review has been completed. There's quite a few reviews in the procedures manual, the main one being the commercial BFR. So if you complete a commercial BFR, as it was in the ABS system, you're deemed to have completed a private BFR. However, you still need to notify CASA of that via the BF004. And Damien, I think, so you're asking about the instructor one. It's the same. So if you do a commercial instructor renewal, that in that case, we'll just check on that. But in that case, that one is automatically updated. So because the commercial instructor review is actually sent into CASA, CASA will update both your commercial and private instructor date. I hope that makes sense.
Under the current system, commercial balloon flight reviews are not notified to CASA. They're just a logbook entry. That's because it comes from the old Car Part 5 regulation. But under the new system, all balloon flight reviews are notified to CASA. There may be a change coming for the commercial one, but we'll let you know about that when it comes.
So that question from Sarah, that's the question. That's what I'll check, whether you need to complete a BF005 as well as send in the paperwork for the commercial review. So I will check that. We move on to the next page.
Did you do that last
Oh,
time?
did I do that last one? Maybe Alana, if you can go back, I didn't do that last point. So once you have completed a BFR or any other transaction with CASA, we're recommending you apply for a reprint of your permit. A reprint, I mean, it's a first print, but it's called a reprint. You get a print of your the paper permit, and that's a BF002 form, and also with a $25 fee. A couple of the MOS rules have been brought forward into, there's two main rules that have been brought forward into the procedures manual. The first one's around weather assessments. So the rule there is around no more than 2 hours before a flight, a PIC must study authorised weather forecasts and authorised weather reports before commencement of flight, and that must be valid for until 2 hours after planned landing time. So an example there, if you're launching at 0700 hours for a 1 hour flight, weather must be known through to 1000 hours. And an authorised forecast is one issued by the Bureau. So you should check something on the Bureau, but also other relevant weather sources may also be studied.
Yes, Damien, this is being recorded. We should have mentioned at the beginning, but this presentation is being recorded and it will be on YouTube, on CASA TV, but you'll be able to see it all there.
Cool. The other rule that's been brought forward is flights over populous areas or public gatherings. So balloons must be flown at a minimum height of at least 1,000 feet above the highest feature or obstacle within a horizontal radius of 100 metres at the point of ground or water immediately below the aircraft. But there are 4 reasons where you may not be able to do that. So if you're conducting manoeuvres necessary to achieve a safe landing, or you're participating in air display, to subject to approval of 91-180. For instance, if you're going to Mildura next week, or you engage in procedures to determine the suitability of your landing area, or you're conducting a flight to navigate to a planned landing area. Otherwise, you should be at 1,000 feet over a populous area. So we're almost, I think it's 2 pages to go. So since the 2nd of December, what CASA has done, as I've shown you, we've got a dedicated website for private ballooning. There will be a new version of the procedures manual, so that'll be the current one published is version 1.0. There will be 1.1 that we hope to have out next month, and that again, it really just fixes has some omissions and errors, fixes some of those or all of those. Hopefully I've got all of them, Alan, and we'll publish that on the website next month. We've also audited all of the authorisations that came across from the ABF, so they are now 100% aligned in CASA systems. Also, if you want to know what CASA, what permits and endorsements CASA has registered against you, you can log into the CASA self-service portal. It's different to the My CASA portal. It's another portal, and you can see your permit and endorsements in there. We've also made some fixes and improvements as people have used the forms. They've had some suggestions for improvements for those forms. So I think the BF 003, 4 and 5 have certainly had an update since they were first published in December, and there are more updates to the other forms coming as well. We're amending 9554, as I mentioned before, to fix the errors and omissions. We've also, as people may remember, the CASA put out a Q&A document in December. We've revised that document. That'll be available at Mildura. It'll be in a show bag that CASA will have available, and we'll distribute it via email to others soon after that. We also have a new guide for balloons and hot airships, what's called a plain English guide. It sets out some rules for part 131 and 91 that apply to balloons. That's also in the show bag for Mildura and will be also available on the CASA shop. I think it's available today.
Yeah, I think it's published today, and it's I think that it's a nominal cost. I think it's $2.50 or something, or $2.95, and I'm not sure if they charge for postage, but it's a small cost for a printed book of the Guide to Balloons and Hot Air Airships.
And also, we've completed, or about to complete this webinar. In terms of what's coming up on the next slide. So yes, well, next month we'll publish the new version of the procedures manual. We then, I need to work on migrating the ABF exams into the CASA PEXO system. The next thing to work on is the endorsements for night VFR, parachute drops, hang glider release, and greater than 120 balloon endorsement. And as I said before, just a reminder, the Part 139 mods comes into effect on the 12th of November. That will mean some parts of the procedures manual will be removed, and then we'll publish version 1.2 of that manual. So that manual will then really just focus on issuing of permits and endorsements, and all of the rules will be in Part 131. But we will also need a new 9554, which will talk about the permit and endorsements until the licensing regime is then put into the CASAs at some future time. Then also we'll work on the endorsement for flight and controlled airspace, but that will need to be done in conjunction with other sport aviation. Some people may have remembered that there was some consultation done by CASA around access to controlled airspace at the same time as did the consultation for the medicals, self-declared medicals, and so we're working with that process.